Hello again, this is Heyde with another tutorial. Today I got a question about my setup for piano covers, what software I use, and the kind of things that I do to make it sound as good as it possibly can. First off, I use Alicia's keys. Now I'm gonna load it in here, and here I've got Alicia's keys. So here it is dry. What I really like about this virtual instrument is the realism. It has a kind of intimacy to it. There's lots of really cool settings within the settings tab that you can do, such as you can change the noise between like the sustain pedal. So let me bump this up a little bit so you can hear it. You hear the pedal? I personally love that sound. It's one of my favorite sounds. You can also do the same with the mechanical key noise, meaning when you press the key, do you have a little sound? Hear it? I'll bump it up a lot. It's the key coming back up. That adds a lot of realism to the performance, which I really, really enjoy. One important feature that I think is very cool is the positioning of the microphone. Right now it's faced for the artist, meaning if I was playing the piano, this would be what I would be hearing. But you can also change this setting so it's for the audience. So this is what the audience would be hearing. You can also adjust the spread of the microphones. With 0 being mono, 100 being spread all the way. And then there's some features here for reverb. So you can choose your setting. There's hall, auditorium, and studio. Now, I usually don't mess around in here. What I'll usually do is I'll go to the presets because they have a big variety of presets here. Typically, if I'm going to add a little reverb, I might go for the small concert hall. It's just enough to give it a little bit of a tail. Occasionally, I'll go for small studio if I want something a little less reverb. Something else you can do, I talked about buses in a previous tutorial, and oftentimes what I'll do is I'll control my own reverb outside of the virtual instrument by using a send, and I'll send it to a bus where I've got a reverb track. So you can check out that tutorial if you're interested in that. My one critique of Alicia's Keys piano is I find that the low end, the very low end, has a little bit of odd artifacts at the end of the notes. I'll give you an example. Do you hear that weird sound coming back? Now, pianos oftentimes, because the strings are resonating, this is probably what her piano is doing. I don't think it's an artifact of something that was put in afterwards. So some things I do to just polish it up a little bit, make sure it sounds nice. First thing to keep in mind is that when they record these samples for virtual instruments, oftentimes they're keeping it dry so that users can have the customizability of altering it. Let me play some of the low range. Okay, so you see already that within like 20 to 50 hertz, there is some activity going on. Not much, but a little bit. That's starting to get into the sub range, so I'll usually cut that. I've gone up here. I click this, basically choosing how much I'm cutting. And I'll put it all the way about to 50. It's an imperceptible difference for most people. It's really just cutting the very, very, very lows. Sometimes in the high range, you can get a little hiss. There's a little bit, not enough. What you could do if that bothered you, you can cut a little bit up here. Again, not enough to influence the sound. If I cut too much, it might sound like this. But just enough to get rid of any of the hissing. I don't typically do that. The last thing I might do is occasionally you'll have sampled virtual instruments where the output volume of the entire virtual instrument isn't exactly as loud as it should be. But if we take a look here, I'm going to play this as loud as I can. Let's see where this thing falls. So this one's actually generally pretty good. When I play very loud, it kind of peaks somewhere around here. It's not clipping, which we like. If I was playing a very quiet piece, which oftentimes I am, you see just how low in the mix this is. And I wouldn't want that. So if I knew consistently I'm going to be playing a quiet piece, I would put a gain on it. A gain is just a manual reduction or increase in volume, depending on what you select. And I might bump this up by, let's say, somewhere around 10. There we go. Now we have something a little more reasonable, closer to 0. The reason why we would do it through gain as opposed to just bumping up the volume, there's 2 reasons. Number one, volume in the tracks can only bump up 6 dB. That's not enough. The other reason is that a lot of fine-tuning happens around 0. So in other words, if I want to make minor adjustments with volume, it's easier for me to do it when it's centered around 0. When you start getting around these areas, you notice how much faster they change. See how it's going from 26, 25, 24. When you're here, there's more room to make minute changes if necessary. I don't typically use compression because I find that compression squashes a lot of the emotiveness in solo piano performances. I would use compression in an instance if I was doing more of a pop song where I needed the dynamics to be more consistent throughout. If you have any further questions, let me know in the comment section, and let me know what you'd like to see me talk about next. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video.